Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jodi Hammer, and I am the Global Reentry Career Services Specialist with the National Peace Corps Association. And I'm thrilled to be here with you today, along with my colleague Valerie, who's going to be helping. Valerie, if you want to wave. We don't have too many of you that are showing your faces, but hopefully during the course of the event, you might join live so we can have more of a chat feel, but that's fine either way. I am really excited to be here to talk to you more about getting started with the job search. This is something that obviously is a very important and pertinent topic, especially for the folks who have recently, been evacuated and are looking at what's next. But of course, we are inviting any RPCV who would like to participate to be on this session as well. So we look forward to having input from everyone. I want to introduce myself very briefly and then jump right in to how we're going to be handling this. I served in Ecuador in 1994 through 97, which seems like forever ago, but in many ways it seems just like yesterday. And Peace Corps was the most formative experience of my life. I returned from Peace Corps, actually worked between the nonprofit, corporate, and federal sectors. Most recently, before my current job, I ran the Career Center at Peace Corps headquarters. So worked with returning Peace Corps volunteers, medically evacuated, volunteers, volunteers who've been back for some time, helping them with career transition, workshops, one-on-one coaching, that kind of thing. So really happy to be here with you today and to share some tips and such. But I do want to let you know up front, I really want this session to be as interactive as possible. So we're going to be taking a lot of questions. I'm breaking the presentation kind of down into 4 stages, the job search into 4 stages. And at the end of each of those, I want to ideally allow some Q&A. So feel free to submit your questions anytime into the chat box. We would ask if you could, it will help Valerie and myself a lot in kind of getting through as many as we can. If you can put the topic or that you're talking about, whether it's networking or interviewing or whatever the topic is, put that in all caps so that we can then best determine where it will, fit in for the Q&A. I also want to remind folks that we are recording this, so don't feel like you have to take down notes on every single thing that is said necessarily. Just know that we will eventually send that to you within a week, and you'll be able to look back on it and such. I would also recommend that folks save the chat box before you end. People I know have to drop off at different times, so I want to make sure everyone hears that up front. It's really advisable when you go into the chat box itself and you click on the bottom, there'll be the 3 little dots. Click on that and there should be one that says save chat. Save it so that you can then look back. A lot of times, there might be some good questions in there and some answers and conversations. So I urge you to do that as well. So without any further ado, let me go ahead and share my screen. I have a PowerPoint that I'm going to be sharing with you. That'll just kind of be it'll be the form of how we'll keep things organized. So so thank you so much for being with us. Let's go ahead and just jump right in here. So I want to get a sense from the audience, where are you in the job search, right? There's many different stages you might be in. Are you, completely overwhelmed or fearful or procrastinating getting involved in the job search? Any of those things would be number 1. You can just put the number in the chat box, is fine. I'm just trying to get a sense of where folks are so that I can tailor my remarks to really, meet you where you are the most. Or secondly, are you, torn between reinstatement and moving on, and there's all these decisions and options that are now being recently granted to you, but you don't know when that is. So are you, kind of in that in-between stage? Or maybe you are just uncertain as to what kind of sector you want to work, in, and that's your biggest stress. right now, figuring out, how do you figure out what kind of work to do that would be fulfilling and such. And then, or do you have, number 4, an idea or of the field, that you're interested in, but it's just, you're maybe just starting, just kind of getting your feet wet, and maybe this is your intro into that. And I hope that it will help you continue to move forward if that's the case. Or lastly, do you know very clearly, some people do, right? Very clearly know what they want, what sector, or sometimes even the job itself, and they're actively taking measures to pursue that. So sending resumes, things like that, doing the networking, but for that specific job or sector that they're very interested in. So if you can just put those in, I'm just watching them come in here. Wow, we have yep, so there's several that have more than one, and that totally makes sense, right? There's a lot of folks, it looks like, who are at the 1 or the 2, right? I'm just kind of taking a glance here. Apologies for not looking at you here. Okay, definitely 4. Okay, so somebody knows exactly what they want and are pursuing that. That's great. 3 and 4, good. So we have kind of a mix. Well, that's fine. That just really helps me. I appreciate that. I'll take that into consideration as I'm going from here. So let's move on here in our PowerPoint. And the first, the job search process itself, I just wanted to have a slide that kind of showed, the job search is complicated in many ways, right? But it really, if you break it down, it comes down to a couple key, stages, or a couple key aspects, right, of the process, right? Once you've gotten your education and that your experience, all of that, you're then looking to go into a new job. You're looking at what kind of a job do you want, right? You're doing that job search, looking at the qualifications that you have as compared to what the jobs want. You're doing networking to talk to people to gain a better insight as to maybe what this job would entail, or what they like most about working in their sector, and what's the biggest challenge, to get more of that kind of insight as well. And then, of course, there's the application process, right? The meat of the, doing your resume, your cover letter, interviewing, all of that, right? So we'll talk about each of these different phases, but I just really liked this graphic to kind of give a sense of what's all involved. So I like to think of, when I worked at Peace Corps headquarters, we broke the job search down into 4 stages, okay? So the first stage was really knowing yourself, right? So identifying, your interests, right? Really, knowing yourself and what you want, and just importantly, what you don't want, right? Because most people have also had a job where they maybe haven't liked it, and they're like, oh, I know that I never want to do anything to do with any kind of finance or whatever it is, fill in the blank. But so it's really getting to know yourself more, and we'll talk about ways that you can do that, ways that you can gain insight to help you in your job search when we go through each stage individually. But the second stage is really knowing the opportunities, right? Knowing what's out there. And one of the best ways you're going to find out, and especially now in whole, our quarantine reality, is, using social media, LinkedIn, etc., to really explore different, what kinds of opportunities are out there, jobs boards, most everything's online, it seems, these days, right? There isn't a lot of sending hard copy resumes and looking for jobs posted in the newspaper, right? In the print newspaper. So it definitely has changed, obviously, over the years. The third step is really knowing how to tell your story. So it's, in this area is on your resume, how do you tell your story, succinctly, so that people can really get it with just a few seconds when they're looking at your resume, can get your skills, your qualifications, what you have to be able to, put you into the to be considered further pile, as I say, versus the circular file, AKA trash. So we'll talk a lot about that. And then finally, knowing your worth. So that really has to do more with, salary negotiation, but also an evaluation of the job as compared to you. Like, how is this job a good fit? Because just because you get the offer doesn't necessarily mean you're going to take it. Obviously, it depends on your financial situation and all of that. And it's a little different in a slower economy, or in an economy where, there's a lot of things, people that are without jobs. But certainly looking at, like, is this a good fit for you, and not undervaluing yourself. So great. So let's go and talk about stage 1. know yourself. And then I'm going to take some questions. So if you have some questions on this area, please just drop them in the chat box now, and we'll be happy to answer as many as we can get through, okay? So with knowing yourself, you can do a lot of self-inventory, right? I mean, self-identification of skills, right? Where I could give you a list of qualifications or skills or areas, and you could pretty easily say, I like this, I don't like this, I don't like this, I like this, I love this, right? So you could pretty much do a self-identification. That's easy enough. And then you really want to take that time to look at, okay, what are the ones that I really am passionate about? What are some of those areas that I'm more passionate about than others? So that is important as well. So you can start doing some of it yourself, right? You can also talk to friends, and get from them what they see as your biggest skills, or what, past coworkers, past bosses who maybe are mentors. You can chat with them and say, what do you see as, you could ask two-part. You could say, what do you see as the areas that I maybe excelled in most, or areas that I would do the best in, and areas that maybe I might not enjoy or might not be as good at. You could talk to other people and get that insight as well. So that's the first part. But then there are a lot of personal assessments, and there's the Keirsey temperament or Keirsey personality free version. It costs. There's some that have a cost, right? The Myers-Briggs, right? If any of you have heard all of those, like the numbers. I'm a classic ENFP, right? Extrovert, intuitive, feeling, and perceiving. Sorry, ENFP. I'm so used to just saying ENFP. So you could certainly take some of those as well, but some of those cost money. But there are fortunately a lot of free versions. So if you go online and you just do a Google, like free Keirsey temperament, which is kind of like the Myers-Briggs, really, free versions of, interest profiles or skills assessments, you can get some of those free ones, access to some of those free ones, to get an idea of who you are. Now, they might come out and show you like a one word, like you're the, I don't know, inventor, or whatever it is, whatever is for you, right? But then there's no information on it. And then they want you to join in order to pay and, whatever. You just need to take that information, go to Google and put in Keirsey temperament profile, engineer, whatever it is, whatever you get. So, and you can get more information free. So I'm all about the free workarounds, because as an RPCV myself, I remember very well coming back and not having a great deal of money. And I am this way though, always. I mean, I believe in taking advantage of the things that are free, and oftentimes you can get, just as much quality information than as you would if you paid a lot of money. So, okay. And so try those out, definitely. And then let's go on to the stage 2, know the opportunities. Oh, I'm sorry. Before we go on to that, are there any questions that came in, Valerie? I don't know. I'm trying to look at mine. It's kind of way over here. Let me see. Are there any questions that came in about knowing yourself?
Not yet.
Okay. All right.
Feel free to put them in.
Yeah. Feel free to add your questions about any specific aspect, or in advance on other things. That's just fine. Great. So let's go on to stage 2 and talk about knowing the opportunities. So I get it that the current environment, I mean, this is unprecedented, right? We've never been through something like this, really. And I mean, it's awful and it's terrible. I mean, we can spend a lot of time on that, like how it really is. I mean, I feel for all of you, and I know that you're resilient, because Peace Corps volunteers, I think above anything else, and there are a lot of things and a lot of great skills that you develop in Peace Corps, you are resilient, and we will, all of us will get through this. It's just a different reality right now. So there are some considerations that you do need to take account of and think about right now with that, right? There might not be as many jobs in the areas that you're really, that your passion area is, right? But you might think about opportunities or ways, be creative. How could I feel the sense of fulfillment and reward, that whole helping others? There's got to be opportunities, and I know there are some opportunities out there, because we've been hearing about them, haven't we, Valerie? About some of the opportunities to make a difference. And I'll give you just one case in point, which is there's a big demand now, and there's people who are specifically interested in hiring RPCVs because they know how awesome you are, right? They know, what hard workers you are, and that you want to make a difference, and that you're not, you don't need that like just fancy desk kind of whatever. I mean, you guys are like in for getting in the trenches and making a difference. And right now with COVID-19, there's a lot of demand now for the like assistance with the testing, or the testing centers, or the, what do you call it, trackers? Isn't that what they call them? Trackers, where once somebody's identified as having, COVID-19, then you have to look at their, all of their contacts and their contacts. So, that type of thing. So I know that I think there's going to be this featured in the web. It's going to be featured in the next Global Reentry newsletter that should come out by, I think, tonight, actually. So I think there will be something on that opportunity. But also, if you look at, you can look at the jobs boards that exist, right, on this. And the NPCA, we have a jobs board that you can access certainly just by going to peacecorpsconnect.org. And when you click on learn more for the global reentry, it's like the entire homepage right now. So just click on learn more, and you're going to be able to scroll down, and it'll take you right to there's a jobs board here. But I also do want to point you to the RPCV career link, which is a jobs board. It's done by Peace Corps headquarters, and that was something that I was involved in when I was, on that in headquarters versus here now in NPCA. And I just looked recently, and literally there were almost 1,000 jobs that were posted on there. There were a ton of them that were NCE. They want the non-competitive eligibility, the special hiring authority, that, as I understand it, you all are being granted NCE, which is awesome and well-deserved, right? You certainly didn't leave because you wanted to. So whether or not you were in country, once you do have to have sworn in. But assuming you had sworn in and you were a volunteer, regardless of if you were there 1 week, 1 year, 2 years, whatever it was, you're getting non-competitive eligibility.
That's
which
awesome.
it is awesome. It's a really big advantage for you, because a lot of organizations, a lot of federal employers will hire through NCE because it's so much easier to bring people on board. It's not nearly as like lengthy of a process. And I don't want to waste the time going into the whole federal process, but I'm sure I'll be doing a webinar at some point talking more about the federal process and NCE and all of that. But take advantage of that. The other day when I did check how many postings there were, out of the 1,000, it was 452, I believe, were NCE. So that's huge. That's like almost half of the opportunities, right? That's bigger than it normally is, actually. But a lot of them were NCE. But there's a lot of them that are nonprofit. There's some corporate. There's a variety of things. So just go on there, and you can go to peacecorps.gov/career link, or if you just go to peacecorps.gov/careers, it'll take you to their careers page. And then from there, you'll get the first item, I think, is career link, unless they've restructured it. And then they'll have other resources for you. So definitely take advantage of those as well. I mean, I am so excited to be on board with MPCA and doing this kind of work again. And my vision is to augment what is out there, and instead of replicate. So, there's definitely things that I might steer people to check out their jobs board, or check out something here, YouTube, the YouTube channel that has the different stages. We recorded, a webinar on the YouTube channel on each of the different stages of the job search. So things like that, like we want to work together. Okay. So let's talk about reconnecting, and albeit very differently. How many of you are tired of the virtual happy hours or virtual? I mean, they're great. It's great to be able to connect with your friends, or virtual coffee hours to chat with them and reconnect. But let's face it, it's not the same as being able to meet up, get a big hug, welcome back, and just and chatting. It isn't. It doesn't substitute for that. So we do what we can now. And I would encourage you to look at and reconnect with your alma mater. That's a great resource for you. Some of them offer free services for life. Others have like 1 or 2 years, but just reconnecting with them and seeing what they're doing and the people who were there. I mean, that's the biggest thing, right? It's That's really important as well. So that's what I talk about when I talk about connection, right? Your community. What groups were you a part of before you went to Peace Corps, or when you were younger, a little bit, right? A little bit younger, back in college. Were any of you in, I don't know, a dance group, or it might be something with a church, some spiritual thing, a yoga group, things like that. Just reconnect with those people and those organizations, and also join groups online. And I'm going to talk about this in a minute here with LinkedIn. Joining groups that are of interest to you, because it can get you information that you need, but it also allows you then to direct message other people who are members of that group without, as opposed to normally you have to go in and do, a request to, add them to your network, that kind of thing. So just connecting in that organic way with your interest area, with people that and that kind of thing, right? And just know that I think a lot of people worry about, oh, I feel bad asking for help or information. They're busy. They have a lot going on. Well, you know what? A lot of people are actually not as busy as they normally are, because their entire social life is pretty much cut off, right? They're working from home. They may have extra, time on their hands, right? Or this may be one of the things they look forward to the most, is connecting with people, right? When you connect with other RPCVs, RPCVs love to help other people, right? And in general, they love to talk, right? So like talking about themselves and giving advice. Oh yeah, people can love to give advice, right? So it's this whole, it's not I know when I worked at Peace Corps headquarters and somebody would ask me, for time or whatever, it's like, oh, that sounds, I would love to, like, I love to talk to people, and I love to get to know them and hear more about their stories and all of that. And I think RPCVs in general like that connection with, right? So all right, so let's also talk a little bit more then about LinkedIn here. So LinkedIn is the social media for really the job seeker, and I think employers. It's the biggest one, or I should say the most popular one. I forget the figure of how many people have LinkedIn accounts, but it is astounding, right? I mean, it is just, it's absolutely huge. And it's an amazing organization. Now, I don't believe that you should have to pay for the to pay for the account. There's two different versions. There's one that's a free, and then there's a free version, and then there's a version that is, I think it's called premium, if I remember correctly, and that's where it gives you some extra features, like you have zero limits on how many searches you can do for people, things like that. So there's certain things that it brings with it, right, that some find helpful. Now, mostly it's recommended more for employers when they're trying to recruit people, because it gives them some additional features. Honestly, there are workarounds, and one of which I had just learned about in the LinkedIn session that was last week. If any of you participated in Thursday's session with Dr. Rhonda Anstead, I was supporting that session, and she shared something that I did not know. I mean, I'm very comfortable with, like LinkedIn in terms of how it works and such, but she was saying how you can get around, like when you do your searches. Let me explain first how people searches work. So what you want to do is find other people in organizations that you're interested in, right? That's how you want to use LinkedIn. So certainly you can do a search for, an organization, and you might get some people on there that might be, well, if they're directly connected with you, they'd be a first contact. If they're second degree, that's a friend of a friend, or a friend of a contact, right? Or a contact of a contact, I guess I should say. So you want to, like, expand your, as I put in the bottom, the little web, like a spider web, if you will. You want to spread your web of people who know you, right? Who know of you, who know your skill set, right? It's not in a boastful way. It's just in a, expand, so that more people, more people, what they're looking for, they know what you're looking for. And oftentimes you can help each other. You might hear of something and say, oh, that reminds me of what this person was looking for. Let me shoot that to them. And that's how things work, right? Yeah, and with that, to say, when you look at all the jobs that are out there, right, there's not, the majority are not ever even posted officially anywhere. online, right? The majority are under the water, as I call it, or under the surface. So I think of it as an iceberg, right? And you have that part that's sticking above the water. That's the part that's the posted, the ones that's the visible job market, right? But then underneath that is the invisible job market. That's where, when you find jobs through maybe knowing someone who knew of this job and they referred you to the person, or, I mean, like it's not going through that necessarily that I found this, in the Washington Post, in their jobs ad, area, whatever. So know that as well, that's important. So what LinkedIn helps you to do is to expand your under the, your invisible, if you will, web or alliance, right? And meet more people, online, and it's very common. I mean, this hasn't even changed, to be honest, with LinkedIn. I mean, LinkedIn has been virtual. It is virtual, right? So now everything's virtual. But LinkedIn has always been virtual. So it's, meeting additional people and getting to know them, and just doing it in a thoughtful way, right? So how you can do a search is if you go to the, magnifying glass, little, the little search bar, and you click on that, and it'll usually say, and they change this a little bit up, but a people search, or, what kind of search, choose all filters. And then the only ones that I really generally recommend that people fill in are the past employer and the future employer. I mean, past employer and the current employer. So you say, I am looking for people who, and then in past employer, this is the awesome thing about Peace Corps. You put in the words Peace Corps, not Peace Corps headquarters, you just put in Peace Corps. That's the agency of Peace Corps. Whether people served in Peace Corps, whether they worked at the agency, Peace Corps. Everything with Peace Corps is going to come up, right? So there are 200 and what is it now? 240,000. There's well over 200,000 RPCVs. Now, I'm not saying that every single person is on LinkedIn, but I will tell you the majority who are under 50 are. I mean, it's very, it's more common than not that folks have a page. Some may not be updating it, some may not be visiting it, but they generally have at least a shell description and such. So I would encourage you to do a LinkedIn, do your profile and do a good job of it, right? And, we'll talk, actually, Rhonda talked more about this, so I'll probably just point you at this point to that, that recording, which I can get you, the recording to the LinkedIn one, if you want to email careers at peacecorpsconnect.org. Again, careers at peacecorpsconnect.org. So we can certainly get that to you if you'd like. And we probably will be posting it on our website. We're in the process of really kind of redesigning the global reentry area, and our idea is to have these resources and such all spotlighted. So it'll probably be there fairly soon as well. So check there maybe first. At this point, I want to see if there are any questions. If you have any questions about this stage, knowing the opportunities, so, networking, reconnecting, anything like that. Are there any questions, Valerie, that have come in, or?
Yep, we've gotten a few questions in, and one of them was actually about LinkedIn and asking if the opinion was worth it. Sounds like if they get a hold of that webinar, there'll be some really good answers in there, and went through the description there. The other question, are there many entry-level job opportunities available these days?
Like in the world, like around, just in general, you're saying? Yes. Yeah, I imagine. I mean, yes, I think there are. Now, are there the same number that there were before the crisis? I think every aspect, every area has been impacted. But I definitely think there are. I would urge you to go to CareerLink to actually look at what comes up. And many of them do come up that are, entry level to mid level, type of opportunity anyway, that come up oftentimes. So it might help to know a little bit more about like what sector, because it's kind of hard to say globally. There are a lot of, and entry-level positions available. But then again, think about it. In organizations, your entry-level positions are filled, and then oftentimes people move up or out, and then you come in. Oftentimes you come into an organization maybe a little less high up, with exceptions, of course. If you're going for a technical position or something like that, then of course not. But yeah. Any other any other questions here?
There were a few about NCE, and specifically around folks who don't have NCE. What other types of advice do you have for searching for jobs? And then specifically, if you no longer qualify for NCE, are RPCVs considered to, RPCVs are considered to be in the category of accepted service? What does that mean?
Well, accepted service with that's a federal government term, and accepted service basically means that the agency's hiring policies and their HR policies don't follow the standard OPM. OPM, Office of Personnel Management, is like the main one. That's what most agencies will follow, OPM guidelines for, hiring and all of that. So Peace Corps, the agency, for example, headquarters, if you're looking at headquarters opportunities, is an accepted service agency. So it basically means that there are different rules than there are, with the others. And so it's quite confusing, and I don't want to confuse people, but I'll give you a very quick, just to give you an idea of where you might qualify for in Peace Corps headquarters. They don't follow the GS scale, the general services or whatever it is. A GS scale is the most typical pay scale and your grade scale, right, of how you come in. In Peace Corps, they follow the FP scale, which I think is foreign personnel. I forget what it stands for, but it's the FP scale. So they're two different scales, right? But they meet at the 7. And the 7 is considered probably more of the entry level for somebody who has their undergrad and has, maybe a couple years experience, or, that would be the 7 would be where you would probably come in, right? Now, if you had a master's or a couple more years of experience, you might come in at the 9 for the GS level, right? In the FP system, in Peace Corps, it's the opposite. So the lower the number, the higher the pay. So the FP and the GS level are the same at 7. And then a GS9 is the same as an FP5. So one goes down, one goes, it's very confusing, and I don't want to take too much time here because, this is kind of that general overview. But if you do have additional questions, definitely feel free to get a hold of me as well, and email that careers at peacecorpsconnect.org, and I'll be happy to tell you a little bit more about that as well. Okay. Any other questions that have come in on stage 2, or are we?
There's a few that are coming in about the interview process. So
okay.
Really good lead into.
Do you want to just hold those until we get? Yeah, that's going to be the next slide. So that's great. Awesome. All right. So let's just go ahead and get to know how to tell your career story. And this is a huge one, right? I mean, there's no denying RPCVs. You all are really talented and resilient, and there's so many of those different soft skills that you have that make you very marketable, and especially in an environment and a climate where it's a difficult job market, right? That's what can set you apart, and that's what can really kind of get you that job. So some of those you really want to make sure that you pull out, especially in like the interview, some of those soft skills, the communication skills, interpersonal skills, intercultural skills, resiliency, all those kinds of skills are what we call soft skills, as opposed to, your technical skills of maybe, accounting, project management, that kind of thing. Okay. So in your resume, and I mean, we will be doing additional sessions, of course. This is, as I said, kind of that overall overview. But I could do an hour plus on just resumes. I could do an hour plus on just cover letters. So, and I will be doing individual ones. So please be sure to check back to the events calendar at NPCA, the events calendar. If you just go to peacecorpsconnect.org/events, you can see the ones that are coming up. And I will be doing, I'll be doing a resume one within the next, I think, 2 weeks, and an interviewing one as well. So, so with resumes, I have a lot of people who ask me, how long should a resume be? And my answer is always, it depends. Is it for private sector or is it for federal? If it's for federal, it can be a little longer, obviously, because there's a lot of additional information that you have to put on a federal resume, right? If you're wanting to craft a federal resume, it's probably a good idea to start by building one in USA Jobs, because they will walk you through the entire process of what you need to have in there. And so then you get what needs to be in there. Now, I am not a fan of USA Jobs resumes. I think they're really ugly. They're just, they aren't formatted nicely. So I think oftentimes people can do a much better job formatting their own resume. But I used to tell people, oh, don't use USA Jobs resume, do your own. And what would happen is they would forget one of those required 5 aspects that are right. You know, your there's different, including like who you worked for and their contact information, right? Your all of this kind of thing, your highest grade, or salary. Sometimes now that's sometimes optional, but there was a lot of additional information that people would forget. And if you forget one of those items on a federal resume and you're competing for the standard, where there's, hundreds, if not more, people applying for that one job that's open to all U.S. citizens, right? Not talking about the Special Hiring Authority, NCE, but the other. If you leave off any of those, it's grounds to dismiss you from the entire process. So you're DQ'd, you're disqualified. So all of that work that you've done is, for naught. So the other thing why it can be good to use the USA Jobs one is that the hiring officials, the people who are screening it, because they are doing that by hand, they are looking at it. They are looking at each one. They know exactly where everything's going to be. So they like that. So there are some reasons why you would want to do one. But if you do decide to do your own, you can then, format it so it's bold. You have nice formatting that's really nice instead. So it kind of depends. If you're going for an NCE job, I would probably do your own, because they don't necessarily have to have the full formal federal resume. So that's federal a little bit. For the non-federal, lengthwise, I usually say 1 or 2 pages. And that's a really important word that I put in the middle there, 1 or 2 pages. I'm not a fan of a 1.5 page resume or a 1 3/4 page resume. Why? Because to me, the resume reviewer, when I'm looking at it, if I'm thinking of hiring you, it doesn't give me the option to think, oh, well, I wonder if she also has fill in the blank XYZ skills. Well, no, duh, she would have put it. She had blank space. It screams, this is absolutely everything there is to know about me. There's nothing else that makes me special. And you just, I don't want that. So I generally say, if you have a 1 3/4 page resume, just expand it to the 2. You're already going down to the 2 anyway. Expand it with a little more space, a little bigger margins, maybe a little bigger font, just so that it's easier to read, right? You're already on to 2 anyway. If it's a 1 1/4, or less than 1.5, maybe try to shrink it to the 1, leave off some of the stuff so that it does fit on the 1, because of course then they're like, well, I wonder if they also have this. Well, yeah, well, they were at the end of the page, we'll have to ask them, right? So I do think that resumes are really important. You need to review them, have somebody else read it, try to but somebody who's not in your mind, because you are the one. And I am like in editing resumes, right? I can be very nitpicky and find a lot of things, right? But if I'm doing my own, or anyone who's doing their own, your brain knows what it's supposed to say. So there might be a missing word or something misspelled that you don't even catch, because you're so, you think what it's supposed to say, that kind of thing. So definitely take a lot of care and read it over and reread it. Use bullets. I am not a fan generally of paragraphs, because paragraphs just, especially long ones, they just get lost. It's like when they're spending their, 7 to 10 seconds. And that's the reality, right? When somebody's looking at your resume to determine whether you're going to go to that next stage or be basically discarded, they're generally giving a resume, you hear different stats, but 7 to 10 seconds of like looking to see, okay, this is somebody that I want to talk to more, or I want to review more, right? So you want to make sure that comes out. Whereas I feel like your just paragraphs, you get lost in the paragraph, right? It's just easy to get lost, and you just don't get the stuff. I like bullets, and like I said, and I like ED action verbs, like using strong ED action verbs so that it's, designed and implemented, managed, like those kinds of words that are important. And just a note, please managed, I don't care if you've managed a lot, don't always use the word managed. I mean, it's a good word, but let's use some, swap it up. So instead of just managed, it might be managed, supervised, oversaw, the next bullet or some other bullet later, spearheaded, what's some other ones? I mean, directed, there's lots of different words for managed. So I definitely would encourage you to look at those as well. So those are the couple of things, right, that I talk about. I'm a big fan of key qualifications up front, as opposed to just starting with your experience, but only if you do a good job of it. Your first bullet might be an adjective and a noun that describes you as related to the position, with, and then however many, years of experience you have in whatever sector. So it could be, bilingual professional with 10 years of, or 3 years of program management experience, including blank, blank, and blank. Like it might be something like that, right? Over 3 years of specialized experience in, like that kind of, those kind of things. And you can usually, you don't have to spell out the numbers under 10. I know that in comms, they'll always say, spell out under 10, spell it out. We all learned that growing up, but you can actually break that rule. Unless you're going for a job where you're trying to get a comms job, a communications job, then I would probably do the regular. But otherwise, 8 is going to pop a lot more than EIGHT, right? 8 people, and tell the numbers, tell the results. That's a little bit about telling the results, the impact. I talk a lot about STAR methodology, the situation, the task, or some people call it SCAR, the circumstances, whatever, the action you took, and the results. And you want to, and sometimes you could even flip in your bullet, you could put the results first, like achieved a 23% reduction in malnourishment, blah, blah, whatever, through whatever you did, right? So that's what I'll say on resumes. And then I'm going to shoot cover letters and interviews very quickly, and then I'm going to ask for questions. And I have a feeling, at least last Friday, this is where a lot of the questions came out. So start putting in your questions and make sure you use that header if you can, if it's resume or cover letter or, interview, that would be great. Okay. So cover letters, a lot of people ask me, are cover letters really necessary? They are if they're asking for one, obviously, right? But if they're not asking for one, technically they would be optional. Would I still do one or recommend still doing one? Absolutely. I'm a huge fan of a cover letter because if nothing else, it sets you apart from the masses who don't do it. Now, I wouldn't recommend doing a cover letter if it's going to be just a very generic template that's not going to be, adapted at all, or if you are not a good writer and that's not gonna help you, then don't do it. But it allows you, the cover letter allows you to make a case for yourself, it should augment what you've shared in your resume, not just regurgitate what's been shared in your resume, right? So, and you want to keep it to less than a page, and less than a page, I try to always say, right? Because you want them just to be able to kind of get a sense of and get that you really are interested in the position, that kind of thing, but fairly quickly, and why. So, yeah, so that's what I'll say about cover letters. In looking at our time, I want to make sure we leave more time for you to have questions. So interviewing, just the big thing on interviewing is be prepared, come prepared. Don't just leave it to, I'll just wing it, whatever. You want to come in there so that you want to be able to let them know that you've done your research. You're going to come with a list of questions, always, in case they ask, because they almost always do. What questions do you have for us at the end? You want to have more than 1 or 2, because what if they answered those, right? You want to be able to have some there to show them that you care enough, that you did research and things like that. So those questions you might be able to say, in my research, or I was curious to learn a little more about this program. I'd found mention of it in and I'd love to hear how this is working. That just shows them, wow, they've looked up and done more for me, to prep for me. The other thing I would say with interviewing is the prefacing your answers. And I'll talk more about this again. I'm going to be having a webinar, I think it's in 2 weeks, or maybe even less than 2 weeks, the interview one. Look on the events calendar, and you'll see it there. But my number 1 tip that I give for interviewing is prefacing your responses. And by that, I mean setting the context for what you're going to share. So if they asked you a behavioral question, which is very common, right? Tell us about a time you used your whatever XYZ skills in a work environment. Instead of just jumping into the Sure, when I was working, I did this, or, and going into that one example, you can actually set that context to tell them the depth of your experience. So you might be able to say, sure, I have 4 years of direct experience in project management or whatever it is you're saying, right? In XYZ. Most recently in my So you've let them know that there's more than just the one experience that you're giving. And that way, if they don't for some reason like that experience, it's like, well, she had 4 years. I'm sure she had another one that would be good. So it can help you as well. Prefacing is just one of the things that I try to drill into clients a lot, is really preface that. That just helps a whole bunch. And doing thank you notes, definitely doing thank you notes afterwards. So and then yeah, are there any questions that are coming in on these items here?
Yes, there are. We can start with the resume for federal resume. Is there a length that's just too long for a federal resume?
Yes, there is now, because I mean, in the past, I would say technically they wouldn't have a limit. In the past, they wouldn't, right? But they generally don't want to see a 10-page resume, right? Now, sometimes people who are like applying for, SES 15 level, like the highest level you can get to, right? Pretty much in the federal government, they might have so much experience and they put it all, on, and it might be really long. But what I find really interesting is that many organizations, federal organizations, are now putting a limit on the number of pages, which is really interesting because that's been totally not the way for federal employment up until now. So make sure that you read the job description very carefully to see if there is a limit. And then secondly, with federal resumes, in particular, if you're trying to do the USA Jobs system, do not wait until that last date, the closing date. Technically, there's not an advantage to applying early, in terms of like you're not going to get looked at earlier by applying earlier, because they wait until it all comes in and then they do that like minimum qualification. They look at how people rank out, and then they take the top, whether it's top 20% generally or 10%, whatever, and that's the ones that get sent on. So you technically could wait till the end, but you do not want to, because I cannot tell you how many people have gotten into a situation where they waited until that last day or 2 days, and then they're like overwhelmed because, oh my gosh, there's all these extra questions they want answered. So go in, read the job description, read the occupational questionnaire, which will come in the like, how do you apply, how do you apply for this, whatever, and do like open that so you know what it's going to consist of, and then allow yourself adequate time, is what I always say. With non-federal resumes and submissions, I would recommend that you apply as soon as you can when you hear about it, because they could be looking at some people, who knows, throughout the process as well. So. And was there another part to that one? No, the too long non-profit or non-federal, I would say generally, like I said, keep it to 1 to 2 pages.
Great. And then for a cover letter, if a job application doesn't explicitly require a cover letter, should we still assume that including one is a good idea?
I would, I mean, this is me now, and I always say to people when I give, advice and I share things, I am a career professional. I'm basing my tips and such on my, my years of working in the field and such, but people have different preferences too, to some degree, right? So some people might say, don't bother on the cover letter, do a better job on the, resume, and just, if it's not required, that's fine. Then there are people like me who, I used to be more stringent on this, where it was like, they don't do a cover letter, I'm not really looking at them, because if you don't care enough to tell me why you want this and go above and beyond, I just don't feel like that's necessary to hire you. So, but there are different people. So, I mean, I've come a little bit down from mine, but I would still do it if you have time and if you can do a quality cover letter. Now, realize that each time you go for a new job, it's not going to be starting from ground zero. Okay. So don't let that get you either. It's not like you have to write a brand new cover letter. What I would say to do, and it's the same with the resume, you choose the resume or cover letter that was submitted in the past, that's closest to the job that you're going for now, and then you tailor it from there, right? So you're just tailoring it little bits, right? Because you're tailoring it less than you'd have to if you were to like start all over, right? So that's a tip that I think saves people a lot of money. And save a copy of each of your resumes that you submit, because when they do call you for that interview, you want to be sure to look at, how did I describe my experience? There's a lot of different ways to do it, right? How did I, you want to have that. You don't want to go, and the same with the job description. Save a copy of the job description, because it will disappear. Oftentimes when they're getting close to the end or whatever, has anyone had that happen? I mean, yeah, it's not fine. You do it once and it's like, okay, got to save that, note to self. So save it along with your resume and your cover letter, whatever your documents for that job, because then when they do reach out to you and they want to, interview you, you don't have to say, oh, what was this job again? I'm sorry, can you send me a job description? That doesn't sound so great. So that's what I would say with that as well. Were there any other questions that came in here?
There's one person who's in South Dakota right now, so he's looking for a job remotely. With the current situation, it's hard for him to travel, and especially for interviews, some employers don't want to do virtual interviews necessarily. So,
Yeah.
first of all, should he include his address or leave his address off of his resume? And should he include anything about that in his cover letter about his lack of ability to travel or interview remotely?
Yeah, I think it's fine to leave your address off your resume. I think that's absolutely fine, right? That's actually quite common that people do that, especially now, because they may be applying for something in a distant place. That said, if you are applying for something that is really close to where or to where you live, then I think it can help you, because it's basically, I'm already here, right? But they're not going to be looking at it and saying, oh, why didn't they include their address necessarily? If you just have your phone number, and don't worry about changing your phone number to where you want to live. Nobody changes their phone numbers anymore, it seems, so that's not an issue either. Okay, so does that answer all parts of that? Okay. Are there any others?
And then there's somebody else had a question about interviewing. She was a trainee and was evacuated. She'd like to go back into service, but we don't know when that will happen. So as she also needs to search for a job. So what does that interview look like? Should she mention that if it comes? Should she wait till it comes up from the employer? What should that story look like?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and I appreciate the like wanting to be forthcoming and honest and all of that. Not really the time to, when they're interviewing you for the position that that you're interviewing for, I would not mention probably the going back, because it's not definite, right? Like when, and there's so much that's you don't know when it's really going to be, if it's going to be sooner than later, whatever. And putting something out there like that is basically going to give you, it's not going to give you the edge, the advantage. I mean, if they're interviewing 3 people and you say, well, there's a chance I'm going to be going back to Namibia or wherever in 6 months or whatever, people don't necessarily want to bring someone on and then have them leave and then have to retrain somebody new. But the great thing is, that you're going to do a great job when you're there for however long or short that is. So they're going to get so much out of you, and you're going to do an amazing job and work hard. And then when it does, if it's once it does become more solidified, and there is this real, wow, this is a reality that in 2 months I go back, you could share with your employer, I'm really in a difficult situation. I absolutely love what I'm doing here. I really, value the work that's being done, the mission, and I just feel so good about blah, 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 blah. And I've been contacted by Peace Corps about the opportunity to go back and actually finish my service, which is something that I was deeply committed to as well. And, and you could explain it like that. And I think in that scenario, at that time, they would be much more like, oh yeah, I totally get it. Like, good luck. Like, wow. I mean, people are really moved by your stories, I want to say as well. I've, I got onto the COVID-19 website, not website, the Facebook page, just to kind of monitor like what kind of chat there is. And there are so many people who are weighing in with things they're offering, whether it's, hey, if I can help in any way, oh, free housing, oh, free this, oh, let us help. Like, people are coming together, and more than anything, your cohort of the entire, right, all of the folks that are on that and have been evacuated together, you share this experience, and you're really understanding and helpful to each other as well. So I think in your interviews, in your applications, this story that you have, as difficult as it is, and I know it's difficult, you know, it's unfinished business, it's, you know, everything, you know, all of that, right? It's grief, it's all of that. But that story is such a compelling story that anyone that I've shared, even, and it hasn't been nearly as well as you all have shared, but when I've just shared, people have gotten a hold of me because they know that I worked in Peace Corps for so many years, and then I'm an RPCV, and they're like, oh, I heard that they've all been evacuated. That's awful. It's like, I mean, they're behind you. They have your back. So I know that as well, that they're going to be understanding as well when things change. I predict.
Great. And then I think we're caught up.
Okay. Awesome. So I did the STAR methodology, you know, the effective storytelling tips, you know, quantifying the percentage or the amount or the number of schools you worked with or the students that you trained or taught or whatever is a lot more powerful than just taught English to, you know, Ecuadorian 8th graders. I mean, so you can make that a lot more compelling. Okay, great. So we'll keep going on here for know your worth and the needs. There are considerations that you want to make sure that you take, that you really think about before you accept an offer, right? I think a lot of times RPCVs, when they come back, you know, we're used to earning practically nothing, right? You just have your walk around, you know, your allowance, which is like nothing. So you know, you get this job offer and you're like, they're going to pay me $40,000 or $35,000, you know, in DC or in, you know, San Francisco. I'm so excited. Like, that's great. Sure, I can make that work. I only earned fill in the blank, right? $35,000 in a large urban area is going to be tough. It's going to be tough to live, right? So just don't jump at the offer just because it's the offer. Make sure that you consider a lot of things, but you know, the money, the how it makes you feel in your gut. I mean, that's that whole, like, is this the right opportunity for me? If you don't feel it's right, if it's really like, I don't feel good about this, my advice is not to take it unless your economic situation mandates that you take the next thing that comes because you need to pay that bill within 2 weeks, or you're, you know, out of a place to live or whatever. Then certainly you've got to make those exceptions as well. Salary negotiation, you almost always, there's nothing wrong with asking for money. And it's so funny because in our society, you know, we dance around so many things. And it's like, oh, I feel it's uncomfortable, right? Talking about salary and wanting more, and you feel bad, or you feel like, oh, I don't know. They're not going to turn the table and say, oh no, we're not going to give this job because you asked for some more money. No, if they're going to say no, they're going to say, I'm sorry, you know, we it's a grant funded position and we just don't have any more than this. And then you've got to make the decision from there. But there's nothing wrong. You lose nothing by asking. So I always say, ask somehow like this, like, and you don't ask about salary before, like, they're really interested in you. Like, ideally, when they give you the offer, then you have more leverage. Then you have more ability to ask for what flexibility they might have. So I generally say, ask something like this. You know, when they give you the offer, and you know, wow, I'm really, you know, I'm so grateful for this offer. I'm excited about the opportunity to join your organization and bring my XYZ skills. You know, it just does seem like such a great fit. I'm wondering, what, if any, flexibility might you have with regard to your to the salary based on my fill in the blank, make a case, my master's and 3 years of specialized experience in, what is it that why are you asking for more? Why do you deserve more? You ask, what, if any, flexibility do you have with regard to the salary based on da, 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 da. The worst they can say is, nope, there's none. But they might, and often, because rarely is the first amount that comes out their top offer. They usually have at least a little bit of wiggle room. Not always, like I said, but sometimes. In nonprofits, it depends. But in general, there's some wiggle room, right? Now, this is different for federal. Federal, it's very scripted by what the, you know, like, you need X amount of experience, you know, time 1 year at the labor grade below before you can qualify. It's very complicated, but there's less of that. You can still ask what, if any, but what it's going to be mandated on there, what it's going to be built on in federal is going to be your prior salary history. So, yeah. So anyway, to some degree, that is, at least. So you might as well ask. I mean, there's nothing they could say but no. So there's not a big deal. And you might walk away with more, and then it's like bonus. Anything, you know, many people leave with leaving benefit dollars on the table. So, and then thirdly, what I always say when you don't get the offer, because you know what, sometimes you won't. And I know it's disappointing, and I know, you know, for every, I try to keep that attitude of, for every no, you know, every no is one step closer to a yes, right? Just keeping that positive mental you know, perception, and that you want to be positive in the job search and in the interview and all of that, because if you come across as a negative Nilly, you know, everything's negative, down, this, negative, that doesn't bode well in that. So when you don't get the offer, I strongly encourage doing a thank you for the rejection letter. And you don't necessarily say thank you for the rejection, but you say something like, when they let you know, thank you so much for interviewing, for interviewing with us. We've gone with another candidate, whatever it is. We wish you the best. You write back and say, thank you for letting me know regarding your selection decision, regarding the, or, blah, 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 regarding the XYZ position. While disappointed to have not been chosen, I wish you the very best with your chosen candidate. Should future opportunities arise, please let me know, as I remain deeply committed to the blah, blah, blah cause and whatever it is. Sincerely, right? That is the mark of a consummate professional. Even in the face of rejection, you are going to be professional to the extent of writing an email to say, thanks for letting me know, right? And while disappointed, I wish you the best, da, 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 da. You know what happens a lot of the time? The first candidate falls through for one reason or another, either in salary negotiation, or maybe they didn't pass the background check, or they changed their mind, or a whole host of reasons. And what happens then? They're like, wow, this person was so professional, and you might end up with the job. So I always say to do that. So I want to first acknowledge we are just over the hour right now, and I want to give folks the opportunity, if you do need to, sign off, I completely understand. What I would encourage you to do before you do that is to download the chat if you're interested in anything that was in the chat box. And if there's if there's any other questions here on this stage here, are there any?
No further questions, just a comment that was great advice about negotiation, and she hopes to be in that spot one day and now feels empowered to do so.
Well, all right. Well, I am glad. I'm going to put my name and the email that I shared earlier in the chat box for everyone too. But great. So I hope to see many of you in our future webinars. And if anyone is interested in a mentor, we are building out a mentoring program, and we have a lot of our PCVs who've already indicated that they are willing and very interested in mentoring somebody. So if you are interested, we have, you'll see in the, I'm sure you all are in the Global Reentry, you belong already to this, because that's how you're finding out this kind of information. In the newsletter that goes out today, there will be an area where you can click on if you want to either be a mentor or be mentored, and you can register. And we're asking that everyone fill out that. Some people, after the last week's announcement of it, they wrote back to us, which is great, but we want you to put your information in there, because then we can more easily match you and help you. Okay? Sound good? All right, here's my little type career services specialist. All right. So thank you everyone for joining me. And I'm gonna put, there you go, careers at Peace Corps Connect.org. Awesome. All right. Thank you everyone for coming. And we will look forward to seeing you in the future. We do have some resources here that I wanted to let you know, as well as you'll get this in the recording, so you'll have all of that and more. Thanks so much. Lots of folks still here. All right, everyone, take care. I gotta stop the recording here. Did you stop the recording by chance, Valerie, on your end? Oh, it's right here. I got it. Thank you.